Hey, welcome to another episode of the New England Endurance Podcast, where we explore endurance sports here in New England. I'm your host, Art Trapotsis, along with Easy E, Eric Schenker. And
What
today,
up? What up?
what up? Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Kelly Catale, the Executive Director of New England Youth Cycling, NEYC, and the founder and president of Team KellCat Development, also known as KellCat Devo. Women's participation in cycling, I believe, has been growing steadily. And with more girls joining and excelling in sports like mountain biking, programs like KellCat Devo play an integral part in creating these strong role models for the next generation of female athletes. So I'm really excited to learn all about this and welcome Kelly to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I am super thrilled to be here. Really, this is awesome.
Great. So Kelly's got a pretty amazing resume. She's a former professional mountain biker, a two-time single speed mountain bike national champion, which we definitely need to unpack, a three-time Team USA member for the Marathon Mountain Bike World Championships as well. After racing professionally for 7 years, she transitioned to leadership roles in the cycling community, where she's now dedicated to nurturing the next generation of cyclists, especially young girls, which I think is awesome. Through her work with New England Youth Cycling and KellCat Devo. Kelly, again, a warm welcome from my side as well to the show, and really excited to get into this because this is bread and butter, celebrating New England endurance, but getting down to the next generation of those superstar New England athletes.
Absolutely. And frankly, the stuff that we're doing is feeding all the big endurance sports when they're adults too, right? So the goal is to keep this kind of the cycle of endurance sport in New England thriving.
Absolutely. So you've had a super accomplished career in racing. I would like to chat a little bit about this single speed mountain bike champs.
I feel like we could have an episode dedicated to just single speed racing.
First of all, like, okay, where was the event? Why did you choose single speed? Like, do you just not like gears? Just can you tell us a little bit about how that race went, or one of those races that you won?
Yeah, both of the races took place at, well, Mountain Bike National Championships, but those 2 years were based in Pennsylvania. So it was at Bear Creek Mountain Resort, I think is the name. And it's a mountain, a ski mountain. So of course, everyone asks me, why would I possibly want to ride a single speed? And I think it's hard to answer that without sounding a little bit insane. And I think
No, go
actually
for
I
it.
might be. We all have a touch of it, right? So I just love suffering. And I also love uniqueness. So I like doing something that isn't necessarily traditional. And so it kind of makes me stand out a little bit more. And single speed felt like that perfect combination. And it also allowed me to participate in a way that I felt good about, because in racing in general, for that style of national championships, it was the XCO. So it was like the 90-minute kind of race. And I excel at marathon. So the more like 4-hour kind of race. So if I still wanted to feel like I could participate in a way that made me feel good while being present at nationals for the KellCat Devo team, I felt like single speed was the way to go. And I have a ton of single speed friends who just really influenced me.
What was your gear ratio that you chose?
I was riding a 32 chainring and a 20 cog on the back.
Oh, did you have to walk or did you run out of gears?
I did not walk a single portion of that
Wow,
of that course.
that's cool.
I regretted it a couple times. I really had to burn a match to get up a really steep pitch or something. It's the suffering is for me is such a joy.
That's awesome. Are you going to do another one?
Yeah. So this year, National Championships is going to be in Roanoke, Virginia. And unique for, I think, the history of national championships, at least for the most recent history, Roanoke's hosting marathon, XCO, and short track all in 1 week in 3 different parks in the city. So they're kind of showcasing 3 different areas. And we're taking the Devo team down. Some of the girls want to do marathon and XCO. Some want to do short track and XCO. Some want to do all 3, which is wild to me. I am going to be racing both marathon and XCO on my single speed this year. I've never ridden in Roanoke, but I have some friends down there who say it shouldn't be an issue. You know, I'll probably suffer again. May use the same ratio just because of the hills. Yeah.
Nice.
So you mentioned the marathon a couple times, and this is the New England Endurance Podcast, and we've got open water swimmers and we've got runners, and people are probably asking what is a single speed, some of our listeners, but let's, marathon is a ubiquitous term. I think that we, for those here in New England, and I'm not sure when this podcast will come out, the Boston Marathon was just 2 days ago. So, but what is marathon mountain bike racing? Could you talk a little bit about that discipline, and also tell us, you said you like to suffer. Tell us why you love that discipline, but tell us why you also hate that discipline.
All right. Wow. Okay. So much to unpack here. And before I even do that, I just want to say single speed, for those who are like, what is a single speed bike? It's literally, it's a bike that only has one gear in the back. So it's one speed. It's exactly what it sounds like. So you pick your gears before you go out to ride and you're stuck with it. It is always the best gear and the worst gear, because at some point it's a good gear and most times it's not. So moving on to marathon.
What's the adage? Even a broken clock is right twice a day or something.
That's right. Yeah.
Something like that.
And honestly, every bike comes with a hiker, right? So you can walk if you have to.
Good. I like that.
So moving on to your questions about marathon. I will say marathon, most people think, oh, so does every race 26.2 miles? Is that a mountain bike marathon? And it strikes me that there's a lot of that vernacular that crosses disciplines that sort of transcends the discipline, and some of it needs to stay where it is, right? So for mountain biking, marathon can be a varied length, right? So it depends on the course, it depends on the race, it depends on the year the race is being held. And it can be anything from, there is actually a regulation that UCI says it needs to be at least this amount of kilometers. But my experience is it's around 35 miles to about 100, depending on the day, of course.
That's a pretty big range.
Yeah, it is. And then, of course, you add on top of it, a lot of these races happen at altitude, right? So if you're doing 100 miles at altitude, it's very different than 35. So there's that whole element of terrain and weather.
So it's anywhere between 4 hours and 14 hours.
Correct. Yes. Indeed. Yes, it is right about that. And for some longer, for some shorter, right? I mean, a 35-mile race would take, I might do it in like 3 hours, right? So it would sort of depend. But yes, it is far more than a 90-minute Olympic length race. And you asked me why I love it and why I hate it. I think it's because you can love and hate it at the same time. I struggle with, and I'm very vocal about it through my network and social media, I struggle with mental health challenges, anxiety, depression, and I have my whole life. There is something really quieting and peaceful about suffering. You have to forget about everything else when you're out on the bike racing, because if you let the other stuff come in, you're not racing at your best, because you're using mental resources to think about the email you meant to send or the thing you should have said that in that conversation or whatever. And instead, I'm focusing on, am I eating enough? Am I riding smoothly? Am I focusing, right? Am I staying focused on technical terrain? And that allows me to almost feel free of the things that really feel heavy in the day to day. So for me, it's an escape in a way, and it's almost, I guess, a therapy in a way is another way to put it. So I love it about that. And then what do I hate about it? I guess in the moment, I have actually negotiated that I would never ride a bike again in the middle of a race. I live in a town where tandem skydiving was, I think, where it started. And so I promised myself I would become a skydiver. Like I have negotiated all kinds of things because the suffering is so long, right? There are climbs that last miles on these courses because you're talking about 100 miles. So I guess the in moment suffering is very tough, and it does make me sort of hate it in the moment. But endurance athletes know about type 2 fun, right? That's the fun that you have when it's done. You get to look back on it and say, that was a lot of fun.
Yep. Well, that was a great answer. So just to take a step back here, when we created the podcast, we had a whiteboard basically of like 50 people we wanted to interview or groups. And this group, the New England Youth Cycling, was on the list. It was on the list as actually the New England high school association. So I would love to just hear about your impact there. Could you start by telling us a little bit about NEYC and your role, and what are you guys doing in the New England cycling community?
Okay, there's a ton here. So ask me as I go if there's things you want, like threads you want to pull on. But we, New England Youth Cycling, or NEYC for short, is an organization that focuses on getting more kids on bikes, right? That is, if I was to boil it down to its essence, that would be what the organization does. We use mountain biking as a form of kind of connecting with the kids as a tool for growth and development and community building. We are really founded in our core values are really in well-being, right? So teaching these kids how to take care of themselves and be good humans, growth and integrity, and then community. And we, New England Youth Cycling, have existed we're actually entering our 10th season of racing and our 11th season as an organization. We started in 2015, and let's see, I guess we're spread out across all of New England, right? And we've got a bunch
And
of
all
kids.
6 states, including Connecticut?
In Connecticut, yes, we have some in Connecticut. I know that CCAP is a different organization that has a bit larger of a footprint in that state in particular, but we have some crossover between, kids who participate in both leagues. But yes,
Nice.
I think we don't have anyone in Maine. We might have
Okay.
one person in Maine. It's actually a frontier that I hope to grow. And we can talk about growth and where I envision the league and where we all envision as a management team, right? It's not just me, right? I could say but I stand with a large group of really supportive volunteers and board members. But yes, so New England Youth Cycling, we serve the greater New England area. We have lots of teams, and we can talk about some of the stats if you'd like. But
Yeah.
ultimately, we are an organization that uses mountain bike racing as a tool to achieve our values and our goals. We have kids. Originally, we started as NESCA, which is what a lot of people know us as still. That stands for New England High School Cycling Association. So back in the day, NESCA was racing for high school aged kids. And then after some period of time, we recognized as an organization that there's a real opportunity to lower that bar of entry to younger ages, because by the time you hit high school, a lot of these kids have chosen a sport they love already, right? And our goal is to get them into the sport sooner and love it sooner and maybe hold on to it longer. And so we put the bar down to fifth grade. So then our races became fifth grade through 12th grade. And only a couple of years ago have we now started to introduce programming, or it's not even started. We've got some great programming now we call them development teams, which we could get into that misnomer, I think, in some way, because I have a development team that's sort of like on the other end of the spectrum. But we have development teams for K through fifth grade now. So we have 4 of those in the league, not a ton, but that's an area of growth that I really hope to focus on in the future, because it's really a feeder into the racing. And it's also a way to introduce kids in a really safe, fun environment. So we've got racing, 6 races during the spring in 6 different venues. And it's a really phenomenal opportunity for kids to meet other kids who like biking.
It's incredible, Kelly. And I don't think I know a little bit, having had a sort of past relationship with NESC in a way, and New England Youth Cycling, but I don't think people realize how big this organization is and how many teams. Could you speak to that a little bit? And one of my favorite things has always been the team names, which might be the most creative things ever. So if you have a couple off the top of your head, think about it otherwise. But how many teams, how many coaches, how many athletes? Is it public schools? Is it independent schools? Is it not schools? Try to paint a picture for us of the scope of this organization.
Yeah, let's start with some numbers. For 2025, we're in the midst of, we have literally a week and a half until the first race. Am I ready? I'm as ready as I'm going to be. We have registered at the moment 942 athletes. So that is across the full age range that I mentioned. We have 469 coaches or something like that, registered coaches that are fully licensed. And that's not even the coaches who are paid who are still trying to get all their requirements finished. So, I mean, that ratio alone,
Ratios.
almost a 1-to-2 ratio is amazing, right?
Wow.
And, granted, we've got parents who feel like, well, what better way to spend time with my kids than riding a bike with them, right? So we have a lot of essentially ride chaperones, but they're still coaches. They still have the training and they still are respected in our community and they're the glue that holds us all together, right? So, okay, and all those coaches are volunteers. So it's really important to note that there's literally 3 people involved in the organization that get paid, and the rest of them are all volunteers. So, okay, so we have 34 race teams, and they're spread out across all of New England in every state except for Maine right now. Like I said, I do think there might be like one Maine kid who participates in one of the Seacoast teams. And 4 teams are development. So those are the K through 5th grade. And let's see. So I got the stats. You asked about
one of our teams locally, I think, is called After School Suspension.
It's so great.
When you asked me about team names, I was like, that one is one that I think is
There's
funny.
like
And they have
Chain
like
Gang, and there's just, I mean, some of the teams I remember were just so creative. And I think from my perspective, also the fact that the team names were fun for me implies that it's a fun group to be a part of too, right? Like, so there's super, super serious, intense things that we can all do in youth sports and club sports. And I'm sure there are super, super serious kids riding. But the fact is that if we're going to take the time to create a really fun name like After School Suspension, this is a great group of kids that you want to be hanging out with.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if the team name isn't the most creative, it's still one of the things that we are really proud of in our community is the focus on growth, development, fun, community, right? It's the things that make kids who may not fit into traditional sports, right? Ball sports and whatnot, they are welcome here. Along with the kids who do fit in, right? I mean, this is a community where everyone is welcome. And everything from beginner racers, right? We have a category and we can get into this, but we have categories, different race categories with different race lengths. So we define our races by laps, and our beginners do 1 lap, and they may never have raced a bike before, right? And then we have the 4-lap race for the high schoolers, and that is some of those kids will go on to podium at nationals or race in Europe and do great things on the bike competitively. And we still welcome the kids who may never race again after high school, right? So we've got a very large spectrum of engagement and interest and motivation, and our league accommodates all of that. And we make it so that it's really focused on progress and fun. Our group, so you asked about, like, are they school teams? Are they not school teams? Our teams are defined by zip code regions. So we have teams that may cover just 1 zip code, which means probably all those kids go to school together. Or we have 20 zip codes for 1 team. And so it's a regional team. And we did that, makes it so that because unfortunately, initially when you start any sort of organization, to get a team that's of substantial enough size to be called a team, it's really tough if you just say, hey, 1 school, let's make a team. And I know that's a model that works for a lot of other sports. And when you start a new kind of league, you kind of have to be flexible and adaptable. So we are very much so a regional sort of, you could have kids from nearby schools all riding together. I think that is so rad because you're connecting with kids you would not have met otherwise. And yeah, our focus is around growth and development. So we have different categories for the kids, and they get to race against kids from all over New England, right? At every single race. Everyone's welcome to every race.
So if I'm on a high school team, or if I'm a high schooler and, similar to, let's say you're on a basketball team, you have the upcoming schedule for the season. And it sounds like you have a schedule of 6 or 7 races, and it sounds like it's a spring sport. How does that work? Like, when are these races, and where do they take place?
Yeah. The lovely part about mountain biking is it's a year-round sport in a lot of ways, right? But for our race season, it's a spring season. So our first race will be Star Wars Day, May the 4th. And we do race themes actually for our races. It's a relatively new thing for us. And our first theme naturally is going to be Star Wars. And so May the 4th is the first one. Then 3 weekends in a row. So 4th, I have it written on my board. It's probably permanent at this point, even though I started it in white marker. And then the 18th. So it's 3 weekends in a row. Then we have Memorial Day weekend off, and then 3 more weekends in a row, and they're all Sundays.
So basically, it finishes up before the end of the school year
For
the.
some. Yeah, for
Okay.
some kids. We tend to kind of coincide a little bit with graduation. So our graduating seniors may miss a race or two just from all the festivities, prom, and all that stuff. But generally speaking, it's right around where the end of the season hits. So if a kid was going to choose a sport, they would likely compete with a lacrosse or something, right?
Yeah.
And it's no different than ultimately this sort of in some ways I think replaces those sports where kids maybe don't make the varsity squad for high school or whatever, right? And they excel at biking, which we welcome all.
So you mentioned the theme is something that's kind of new. What are some of the biggest things that you have changed or altered or that you will change under your leadership here? And I forgot to ask, how long have you been with the organization?
So I've been with the organization for 1 year and 4 days.
Happy
But who's
anniversary.
counting? So it's been almost exactly a year. And gosh, it's been a whirlwind. I mean, such a big year. And I feel like I wish I had like an hour to think about this question because I had this hard time of committing to like what's the biggest thing or
Or
one of
just
the
what are
biggest.
some things, maybe, if
What's
it's
some
not.
things that have
Yeah.
changed? I am focusing really heavily on the development teams. So the kind of the K through 5th grade age. I really want us to get more younger kids because it feeds that community we have for racing. And it's an investment in the sport in general. So I'd say that's a big change. There was a focus on it, trying to grow that. Another big change is this sense of fun and like let's take it seriously or as seriously as you want, but also remember that we're community, right? So we're collaborative. I think as I'm thinking about this question, I've got like 12 wheels spinning. I'm like, what would I mention? I would say one of the most awesome things that I have witnessed this season that I believe is relatively new to the kind of culture of the league is we had a coaches every January timeframe before the season really kicks off. We have a coaches summit and we invite the head coaches and team managers from all of the teams. In addition to the board members, we invite them to this summit. It's an all-day experience where we talk about the previous year, what went well, financial update, kind of stuff like that. And then the year ahead. What changes do we plan to make? And what do we intend to do with the season to the best of our knowledge at the time? And that summit was so different than previous years where we had it in a very charming space. We used to rent a really expensive conference room. And I'm very much more like, let's be down to earth. Let's wear jeans and a t-shirt and just be humans who are talk about bikes. It was a very collaborative. I actually had the coaches talk about the challenges they expected to face in the season ahead. And I asked them to report out, the top 5 for each of their groups. We had 8 different tables. And we ended up having so many so many trends and patterns in the things
That's
that
cool.
teams were suffering with, or suffering isn't the right word, but challenged by. And these teams never knew. No one ever talked about it, right? So this was the first time where everyone got to see, oh, wow, the Midnight Riders, they actually are, they struggle with something that the big riggers also struggle with. And then in the afternoons, that was the icebreaker. And then I took all those little sticky notes and I hid out at lunchtime and I sorted them. And I gave every table a different topic or a different challenge. And they had to come up with ways to solve it or address it. And then each group presented at the end of the day their ideas. And there were things that came out of it. And you could see teams were taking notes like, I've never thought of that before, or relay, that's so cool, or different ways to run their team practices. And now I'm actually hearing about, and even last night got to be part of, combined team practices where teams will come together and say, hey, let's meet at this place that's relatively close between the two of us. Let's all ride together, get to know each other, and just have a bigger group. And how special is that?
Wow.
How fun is that? So now I would say the sense of sharing and collaboration and communication, even in our Slack channel, when someone's struggling with something now, the coach will put it in our Slack channel and say, does anyone have any ideas of how they might handle this? You get some really awesome thoughts. And I feel like in years past, the teams have been very much their own unit and they work really well and they're an awesome, almost family vibe. But now we're kind of building the family, right? We're the extended family and we all help each other. And I think they say a rising tide lifts all ships, right? I mean, if we're all better, we're all going to improve. And that only starts by helping each other. So I'd say that's one of the biggest changes that I've made. And I haven't done it, right? I've unlocked the gate, but
Yeah.
everyone else has done it. Truly, they've done the legwork. I'm just letting it happen.
Kelly, what were some of would you mind sharing some of the challenges? I think, considering that all of those 400, 500 coaches are most likely moms and dads of kids, and many of us listening or hosting here are moms and dads of kids. So what are some of those challenges that those teams are having?
Yeah. One that came up, these are not in order in any way, but female athlete, both retention, but also recruitment, right? How do you get more girls on the team? And then also, how do you get more girls to stay on the team as they get older, right? We see a big drop off, and that's for numerous reasons around the high school age, like sophomore year ish. Another one was we have kids who are too fast for every single one of our coaches. What do we do? Which is that's a problem we love to hear, right? Like these kids are getting fast and they're enjoying riding fast, but also we need them to be safe. So that's a challenge. There's also some of the larger teams struggle with the maintenance of, how do you engage such a wide range of skills and abilities in one space, right? How do you get it so that the fastest kids and the beginners interact with each other? There's also the opposite is we have such a small team and we can't really break out into multiple groups, but we have a range of abilities, right? So some of those challenges as well. Then there was the idea of how do we market as a team? How do we grow? How do we get more parents who want to be coaches and engaged in the whole process of the league? So yeah, I'd say that off the top of my head, those were the big challenges that I can recall.
Okay. You
Cool.
mentioned the girl, trying to get more girls to ride and also girl retention. Let's transition then to KellCat Devo, a team that you founded, which is an all-girls junior mountain bike team. What inspired you to focus on developing young girls in the sport? Do you think you face unique challenges for a girls development team versus a boys development team? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I could talk for hours. So let's see how succinct I can be. Um, the inspiration we'll start with is when I was a young athlete, I went through probably all the challenges that you hear an endurance young female athlete go through. And I didn't have, I mean, I had my dad and were like two peas in a pod, and he's a phenomenal role model for me. And he was when I was younger. He was my training buddy. I used to be a cross country runner. That was my big thing. And he and I would run together, but I couldn't talk with him about some of the things that I didn't talk with him about some of the things I was going through. And I didn't even know that some of the things I was going through was a challenge, right? I actually had disordered eating and I didn't even really know I was doing it. It was unintentional until college. I ended up breaking my femur in the middle of a run and was
Wow.
out for about a year. So I had disordered eating. I had stress fractures. I had all these challenges around overtraining and all that burnout, all that stuff. And I didn't have a female role model who had been through it or could warn me or could validate me, right? And the anxiety I felt on race day, I'd like nearly make myself sick every race. And so I have always in the back of my head thought, I want to give back to this sport that's given me so much. Mountain biking in particular is really where I ended up because of my running injuries. And I never really knew how. So I had always been holding on to this and knowing there was something more than just the singular pursuit of racing and traveling the world with my husband, trying to race and get great results. And then I had been, as I mentioned, pretty vocal about mental health and anxiety and all of that through my social media. And a parent had reached out to me and said that her daughter, I think at the time was like 12, was struggling a lot with anxiety on race day and the day before. And what could I do to offer, right? Like, what resources do you have? And I remember thinking, I don't really have any resources except for me. Maybe I could talk to her. So I offered to go on a ride. And I remember talking with my therapist that like afternoon before going out to go on this ride. And I was like, what am I going to say? What do I do? I'm not enough. Like, I can't offer anything. And we ended up connecting, right? She was so easy to get along with. We ended up going for a ride, and then after having dinner with the family and just chatting about my own racing and asking her questions, getting to know her, and it bloomed into a mentorship kind of experience, very unofficial. And after about a year of that, I remember the day it happened where I was showering when our best thoughts happen, right? In the shower. And I was like, I have all these sponsors. Could I get them to agree to support a girls mountain bike team? Probably. So I remember like popping out of the shower, wrapping myself in a towel and being like, Joe, my husband, I have an idea. I'm like dripping wet. I'm like, I have an idea. And his response was, all right, let's do it, without any hesitation. And so we started a team, and it bloomed from having the one unofficial mentee rather, who essentially is the original team member. She's still on the team. And she kind of sparked all of this for me and has become a friend and a confidant, and a really great person to bounce ideas off of. And we now have 9 girls, right? So over the course of 3 seasons, we've grown to 9, and it's been really magical. And I am proud of sort of how I'm becoming the role model I so desperately needed when I was that age. And that's really the inspiration behind all of it. Is I feel like, how can I provide resources to the girls and to their parents, right? There's so many things that even now, my parents, I talk to them about the stuff I'm doing, and they're like, man, I wish we had something like that. So
Yeah.
it's really special. And yeah, it's turned into a race team, but it's so much more than that, right? It's community. It's having a space where these girls can learn together, grow together, and also just be their goofy selves, right? I mean, this sport attracts a certain personality in some ways, and I think that it's really awesome to share that with others who feel very similar.
That's really cool. So, do they participate in the NEYC league, or are you doing races outside of that?
Yeah, yes, both.
Yes and yes. Okay.
So they they 8 of the 9 girls, maybe 9 if I can convince the final one, but 8 of the 9 girls for sure are part of NEYC. However, as I mentioned before, NEYC is zip code boundary based. So they are actually spread out across, I think, 7 different teams, maybe 6 different teams. And as a result, they see each other on race day, but they're wearing their NEYC kit. So they've got their jersey on, but they almost all of them are wearing their KellCat Devo bibs. So you can see there's some thread of, we also all have glitter. So we wear glitter on our cheeks. We call them speed sparkles.
Ooh,
And
I
it's,
like that.
yeah, it's fun. And so I actually bought a bottle of glitter for each of the girls this year, and they are empowered to share it with others too. So this isn't something we gatekeep, but we yeah, so there's some similarities between all of us, as we see each other out on course, but they're in different categories, they're on different teams, and they do participate in NEYC. We have a requirement within our KellCat Devo team to participate in a number of events outside of NEYC, where you're wearing your Team KellCat kit and you're representing the team. The name on registration is Team KellCat Devo. And one of those required races is, or the only required one actually, is national championships, because
Oh,
it's
wow.
such a big event. It's a really awesome way for those girls to see what's out there, see what's possible. And some of these girls that are racing at nationals, they're like tiny pros and the same age, right? But they're at next level in a lot of ways. And I want the girls on our team to see, you can't be what you don't see, right? So I want them to see what's possible. And it's just a good experience to practice some of the mental skills we're learning, the fueling related, sports nutrition skills that we're learning, and put them to good use. So we make that required. So it's a team bonding experience and a group learning experience. But then also it's just sort of fun to travel and stay in a big house and all of that as a team.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Kelly, you talked a little bit about your journey, let's say from, probably doesn't sound like traditional team sports, but you were on the cross country team. And we often joke when we interview a lot of our guests, were you also a failed team sport athlete, like, like us, and how we got into endurance sports? But you obviously had a very tough injury with your femur, but how did your journey into and through endurance sports, how has that shaped your coaching philosophy and the way you mentor those young athletes?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I love that question. Before I dive into that, I am technically a failed ball sport girl. So it is
Welcome to
worth
the club.
mentioning in high school. So my parents, they had the curse of having kids who were very capable, very athletically capable. So at one time I was playing softball, cross country, soccer, lacrosse. I played basketball. I had like everything in one year. And I have a twin sister who also played a lot of different things, and a brother, a younger brother, who played a lot of different things. So the season that broke me was actually in high school. I did varsity soccer and varsity cross country in the same season.
Oh,
And it was too much. And the soccer coach was incredibly unsupportive. I don't think any of the families outside of my own knew how unsupportive he was, but he used to put my sister and I in the same exact position on game day. And if one of us failed or made a mistake, he'd pull that one off and put the other one in. And it was
wow.
almost like he was trying to get me to quit. So I ended up quitting because it's way more fun to run and do individual sports, in my opinion, and it suited me better personality wise. So, but anyway, moving in. So actually, I think that part also kind of helped shape who I am as an athlete, because it was clear to me that having an environment that stifled me and didn't make me feel safe, right? On the pitch, I never felt like, oh my gosh, if I make a mistake, it's okay, right? It was, if I make a mistake, I don't play anymore. And similarly, I think, we kind of learn as athletes, high level athletes, that failure is scary and we don't want to do it, right? So I think one of the biggest things that my philosophy around mentorship and coaching is around this sense of being willing to try and fail and learn. So I have reinvented my career multiple times. I have reinvented my identity multiple times because the first time through just wasn't the right fit. I have a degree in biomedical engineering, and I'm using it to some extent now because there's a lot of
Wow.
things that transcend, but it was not the right fit for me. And instead of feeling like that was a failure, it's a superpower in a way. And so my philosophy around coaching and mentorship has been one of psychological safety, right? So you're safe to be yourself, you're safe to make mistakes, and it's okay, because when you do, you learn. And the more you make mistakes, the more you learn, and you become stronger, better, more equipped for future challenges that you face. So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest ones. And then the other one the other piece of my kind of coaching mentorship that has heavily influenced from my own experiences is around results and this sense of worth related to results, and even sponsorship for that matter. I feel like there's just so much focus, especially these younger kids that the age just keeps going younger and younger. This idea, like, I have to win, or I need to be on the podium, or whatever. And I will regularly just shut that conversation down and try to talk about process and what did you do well, right? That has nothing to do with the people around you. And so kind of ingraining that mindset of personal growth and value and worth is so important, because then it doesn't really matter what your results are in the end. And usually the results follow. It's almost like a secondary outcome of the bigger picture is personal growth. And I'm not so silly as to believe that, you can't get to pro without having results, right? Like you have to have it at some point. And a healthy foundation in this sport is one that's on the roots of believing in self progress and the daily habits and the things that make you a good athlete. It has nothing to do with comparison at that point. So my mentorship is very focused on good mental health, good nutrition, good community, all the stuff that makes someone a good human in addition to a good athlete. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, Kelly, you've done an incredible job, I think, getting a lot of people listening excited and wanting to learn more about this, both NEYC or even the KellCat Devo team. What's the first step? How do they find you guys? How do they reach out? And maybe just quickly, there's probably a lot of folks that have, like you said, never raced a bike. What should they expect in terms of training? Anybody's welcome, community support, things like that. Just talk a little bit about the tactical nature of people getting involved with New England Youth Cycling.
Yeah. So it's almost, think of it as like a system, right? So I know we've been talking about New England Youth Cycling and KellCat Devo. And think of like a pathway, right? Where you're kind of imagining the journey an athlete would go on. They start with first learning the sport, and then they learn how to get better at the sport. And then they learn how to maybe compete, and then how to get good at competing, and then competing at a higher level and trying to win, right? And there's a bunch of governing bodies for sports organizations that have a beautiful diagrams and all kinds of stuff. But ultimately, New England Youth Cycling serves the end, kind of the first few steps of that pathway. So we are introducing kids to the sport in that K through 5 age range. So those development teams that we have at New England Youth Cycling, and they're kids who maybe are who are riding a balance bike, right? A strider bike. And they're getting on trails for the first time while being part of this development team. So you can be as young and as new to the sport as kindergarten, as long as you've got a bike that can ride over roots and a little bit of dirt and all of that, and a family that's supportive of it. You don't have to be an expert. And frankly, a lot of the parents who are coaches, I mentioned the 400 something coaches, a lot of them were not mountain bikers prior to their kid joining the league. So we start young, and then it grows into, as you learn the sport a little bit more, you might get pushed up into a different group on the team. And then the race teams are for kids from 5th through 12th grade. And even those 5th graders, 6th graders can be and are relatively new to the sport too. And they're learning how to race more in a way of like, how do you push yourself and try things out? So, okay, so I veered off a little bit, but how do you get?
So Kelly, I think I'm curious, do we go to the website and type in a zip code and try to find a school?
Yeah. So if you're looking for a team, our website is always getting improved. So if you're looking for a race team, we have a map on the website. So if you went to the newenglandyouthcycling.com and you went to our teams menu item, you would find a team finder tool, and you can search for your town and find what team is there. If there is no team, then you get to email our wonderful executive director, me, and you get to ask about maybe starting a new team or joining our independent team, which we have as an option for racers who live outside of an existing region. And it's a 1-year kind of temporary try it out kind of thing before starting a team.
What if I'm homeschooled, but there's a high school, a mile down the road from me? Would I join that team?
Yeah. So because we're zip code based, if you're homeschooled, wherever your home address is, that zip code would be whatever team it aligns with.
And what if I just want to race on the road or cyclocross?
Well, right now, as of 2025, we do not have road racing and cyclocross in our menu of programming. Does that mean we won't in the future? Absolutely not. We are New England Youth Cycling, not New England Youth Spring Mountain Bike Racing. We have a whole vision of where we may grow eventually. It's going to be fed by feedback and desires from our members and everything, right? But right now, there are I think CCAP in Connecticut has some road racing. There's local, like the Wells Ave Crit, for example, I think does some fun road crit racing. There's stuff up in New Hampshire. There's like the Loudon race. I don't know if that's just for adults, but there's all kinds of areas where you can race if you're not into mountain biking. Now, that said, we welcome anyone, right? If you're only ever raced mountain or road and you want to try mountain biking, there's a lot of kids like that in our league, and they find a home here in NEYC.
What advice do you have? What advice do you have for a young cyclist who might be listening to this podcast who hasn't joined a team yet, but maybe is looking to get into it? What would you say to them?
I would actually recommend, because we are so close to the start of the season, a lot of our teams already have sort of created their own micro communities, right? It's hard to join now. So I would actually recommend that if you're interested, you listener or your child, right, is to go to one of our races this season. Go onto our website, look at the calendar, and attend. Just see the race day magic, right? Attend for half a day, a whole day. We get 600 something kids on race day and 30 something teams and lots of parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles, family, friends. And it is a giant bike party every single week. So I would recommend going and just seeing what it's like, maybe talking to some of the kids and seeing, what do you think about this? And for sure, that would be enough to convince anyone to want to join in 2026.
So yeah. Kelly, are you also a race director?
Sort of.
Oh my God, 600 people.
Yeah, so well, technically no. So we pay a part-time race director for NEYC. He's the one who's in charge of securing permits, porta potties, getting the venue kind of layout defined, all that kind of stuff, talking with new venues, all that stuff. And then on race day, I'm the one walking around with the megaphone, starting the race. I'm the doing the podiums. I'm the coach meetings, all that stuff. So we work as a team, and certainly he's very involved in it. So officially, no, I am not the race director because we have the title, but we all kind of work together on race day. I am nonstop, chicken with my head cut off, kind of nonstop. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Kelly, final question. You've done great. I've learned a ton. And I thought I knew a lot about New England youth cycling, but I learned a lot more, especially really sort of fascinated by this K-5 development. I think that's so amazing to get young kids out there. But this is a question we ask all of our guests. Traveled around the world. You've been very fortunate and raced all over the world and all over the United States. But tell us why you agree that New England is the greatest endurance region in the country. Dramatic pause.
Duh. I feel like I need a drum roll. I think New England is the greatest endurance region in the country. Wait, can I say the world? Does it have
Yes,
to be just the country?
100% you can say
Yeah.
the world.
Okay. In the world, and I have raced, in different places in the world, is for its, let's say, 3 reasons. 1, the seasons, because we have some spectacular seasons. And in particular, when you're talking about going for bike rides, whether in the woods or on the roads or the gravel roads, the scenery is incredible. And to be able to be outside and kind of feel connected is really special. So the seasons. Next is the variety. In mountain biking in particular, you can find trails that are relatively smooth and buff, but you can also find super rocky, rooty trails. And I find that I'm a pretty confident technical rider because of the terrain that we have here. And that prepares me really well for when we go out and race in areas where there's super technical features. And then third, the community. I know that we have, New England has a reputation of being sort of like the revolutionaries, right? And Massachusetts, there's I wouldn't even say misnomer, right? Like massholes, right? But at the same time, our community of endurance athletes and just endurance families in general is really special. There's something that bonds people in endurance sport that, this kind of shared suffering, this shared experience. And New England, for whatever reason, we're hardy people who have to suffer through tough winters, hot summers, and varied terrain. It kind of brings us all together. And we all know the magic of it. So I think we kind of appreciate it as a group as well.
That's a great answer. I would be remiss if we didn't ask her, Eric. The other question we ask most of our guests is about the hidden gems.
Yes.
So is there a particular race or event that you participate in New England that you think, wow, more people should know about this? This is a really cool event.
Carrabassett Backcountry Cycle Challenge.
Where that's Carrabassett, Maine.
Carrabassett Valley, Maine. It's in mid-July, and for the first time in 5 years, I will not be able to go this year, and I'm so disappointed because it's the same weekend as Marathon National Championships, so I just can't. I can't make it happen.
Should move it so you could go.
But
we'll add that to the list.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
If you get on the podium, they give you maple syrup.
Yum.
So it's a real gem for sure.
So Kelly, thank you so much for joining us and sharing the story of the New England Youth Cycling Association here on New England Endurance. We're grateful for this conversation and for you telling us, all of your insights and even sharing some of your personal journey as well. And really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I enjoyed chatting with both of you.
Oh, that's great. And we learned so much about New England youth cycling. We learned a lot about Team KellCat Devo. And we also, like you, we have some sponsors that we want to make sure that we thank here as well. And the first one is Lark Fine Foods, which is a 100% women-owned specialty food company baking delicious small batch cookies inspired by grown-up consumers. Maybe we can get Lark Fine Foods, 100% women owned, to send some cookies to a 100% women's development team. So we'll apply a little pressure there. And of course, a fantastic book called The Everyday Athlete, which is a book about balancing work, family, and fitness. And I think all of the coaches of New England Youth Cycling, if they're able to get out there on almost a 1-to-1 scale and coach their kids and be a part of that, they all probably read that book and have figured out how to create that balance.
Good
And
stuff.
For those that want to learn more about New England Youth Cycling, they can go to NEYouthcycling.com or Team KellCat, that's KellCat.org on Instagram. We'll be sure to tag everybody on our Instagram, which is at New England Endurance. So check out the socials and you'll be able to get to all the links.
Yes, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, YouTube, etc. And until next time, keep pushing your limits. Get out there and explore the beautiful terrain of New England, and check out the New England Youth Cycling Association. Thank you.